Howdy, y'all. We're going to start this one inside the shop. Right here, we're at 7J4739. Now, this was the only tractor of the bunch that we brought home that was kind of incomplete, but it does have a majority of the parts. This is definitely the most unique tractor of the bunch, and let me show you why. The front cover was already off this engine. The crankshaft and lower bearings, unfortunately, were missing, but we do have a lot of good components and usable components in here. Sleeves, valves, you name it, the head. But I did want to show, this has a composite gear just like we found on 4G. And I do suspect that our other 7J parts machine did have the same gear, but it had been replaced due to failure at some point. I did notice a previous breakage right here in the block. Now this isn't uncommon. We did actually find one like this on the other 7J that had been brazed and repaired, but this one may have been caused by a different reason. Serial number wise, this engine is very close to the other parts machine that actually is the parts machine that did save 4G. We would not have been able to finish the project without it. This one indeed has the same fuel tower, same fuel system, same injector, same head, same block as the other 7J. And we were able to take this off, and it looks very relatively clean. We're probably going to use these rockers on 4G. So a lot of the decent components that we're looking for were missing, but there are still a lot of very good usable parts right here. And even this water pump, because this is something that I'm working on right now, but there are no brakes or anything in the flanges on here. So this is all definitely usable. I'm going to pull the camshaft out later and check it out. And you might hear a rooster or two crowing here. But yeah, the yard birds are all out in force today. I've looked high and low and have not been able to find a lot of literature on this, but I did find out some information from the folks that I got it from, and his father, who actually worked at the local Caterpillar dealer back in the day, was very keen on how unique and rare this dozer actually is. Now, there's a lot of undercarriage wear on here, and you can see up here these carrier rollers are in poor shape. The front idlers, everything's very well worn. Of course, the track is missing. That side's got the track and all the components. Back here, the frame is bent, and there are a lot of issues with this tractor, but still a lot of good usable parts. While Dad and I are relatively new to this Caterpillar collecting thing, we did notice one thing for certain. All of these machines that we just picked up were, in fact, dozers. They may have been built as act tractors, but they were converted into dozers later on. And every one of them has an absolutely beautiful drawbar. And this one is no exception. It's in very, very good condition. Other than this minor wear here in the corner from the drawbar wearing here. And as you can see, because of the way this is made, you can't move it. Now this machine did come with a hood. I've set it over here on this 6U machine just to cover up the engine, but this is indeed the hood off of this machine. And a lot of you might have already noticed this ugly, I don't know, Dad and I are calling it like a carnival green. It's, I think a city or municipality had this. The collector that originally bought this, who we bought it from his son, bought this tractor strictly for this unique dozer that's on here. Not for anything else, but there, again, a lot of good components for us. The clutch is still in here and well covered up, so I'm going to leave that alone. It's been sitting here for years, covered up. A lot of this components, the firewall, the fuel tank, this will probably go on 4G because ours was dented in. The bracket here, these are often broken, 4G's was. Even the clutch has got wear, but not terrible. The handles, everything else has been inside of this very small cab, so it's survived quite well. And while we're in here, let me go over what I believe the controls are. The funniest thing about this is it's a hydraulically operated cable blade. I can't say for certain which did which, but you have one hydraulic lever here and one right there on the other side. So one would raise and lower the blade, and the other would operate the tip on the blade. You can see these cylinders here and there on the other side. Just for ease of moving this machine around, Dad and I have put this very thick, I think it's 1.5 inch square bar in here across the middle to hold the blade up. But originally, when they designed this blade or made this blade, they took out the spring suspension that was underneath of here, and the whole system actually sat on this solid bar. Not being able to have a side tank or a seat tank, the cab, it kind of encompasses a fuel tank here on the side, and the hydraulic tank is here on the back by this gigantic hydraulic cylinder. There's also a fuel tank over here on the other side. So this is a very unique system. I'm not exactly sure that this is a hydraulic cylinder. There may indeed be one inside of this pipe. I think this is like a 6-inch or 5.5 inch pipe all the way around. But the way that this system worked is there's a hydraulic line you can see going into here. So that would operate the cylinder, push this up and down, and this cable right here would attach up there to this gigantic loop on the back of this dozer blade arm right here. And when you would operate the hydraulics, it would push this pulley up and down, which is connected to this pulley down here, and that would allow the blade to go up and down. Quite interesting to note that while they did have this gigantic tail contraption on here to operate the back of the blade, they put a small hitch on here so you could still tow things around in little trailers and such. This bizarre superstructure actually encompasses what I believe is a toolbox in here, and I'm not exactly certain why that had to be back there. My suspicion is just to give room to stow a hydraulic tank and to give enough clearance behind the cab of this machine for this blade system to work. My guess, being here in Colorado, this probably got used for a lot of snow, as the grousers have been cut out for snow, and they do that so that snow doesn't pack in there and get between the sprocket and the grouser and the pins and throw the track off. But these sprockets, they're virtually shot. The track chains are not good either. They are not quite as bad as 4G, but they have a lot of side wear on them. This dozer blade system, I think, was initially designed to be bolted to the track frames, but this one has been welded. It's got a center mount pin here, just behind the carrier roller back there, and right in front of the sprocket, and up about 1.5 feet off the ground, and the whole blade system rides on that. Now this arm is very heavy. This is 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches thick, and you can see it loops all the way around the back of this cab. It's also very heavily gusseted right here with some 1/2 inch steel. So this thing is super heavy, and unlike a lot of dozers that I've seen, it does not seem to have the brakes and wear that I was accustomed to seeing. Now this blade is very heavy, but it has a lot of wear, considering it's still in remarkably decent shape. There are a few repairs in this dozer blade frame, but really nothing like I was used to seeing. Let's talk about what I do know about this dozer blade. This is called a McCoy blade, and this was designed, installed, built, and serviced by the local Caterpillar dealer, McCoy Caterpillar, that was here in Denver, Colorado. And our family had done business with them in the past. They were the predecessor to the modern one, which is Wagner Caterpillar today. Some of you might have already seen this, but it's something I'm very proud of. It's a pocket watch key fob, and on the back it says McCoy Company, Denver, Colorado, Grand Junction, Alamosa, and Sterling. This was my grandfather's pocket watch. To me, the first thing I think of when I see this blade is I think of the era, and I'm imagining that this is probably late 40s, 50s, maybe even early 60s, and it has that distinct styling of cars and equipment of that era. Now, to me, this thing's ugly, but I can really appreciate the concept of the dozer blade. Maybe it's the paint color, I'm not sure, but to me, this machine, the concept, the design, it's very reminiscent of a 1950s early Euclid machine. According to the tag, this is a 1941 model, just like the other 7J that we have. The serial numbers indicate that they were only about 300 machines apart, roughly. I did notice, at least from an operator's standpoint, there are a lot of drawbacks to this design. Not just the hitch not being usable and the drawbar, but now you have two more levers, in addition to the steering clutches and the main clutch and the gear shifter and the throttle to worry about. How are you going to see what's behind you? This big loop is right at about the operator's head height. So if you're carrying your blade in the upright position like it is now, you're not going to see. To me, the cable system added a lot of complexity to it that was completely unnecessary. And I'm not quite sure why they did it. My suspicion is to allow a little bit of flex with this dozer arm back and forth that perhaps a hydraulic cylinder directly attached here wouldn't be able to take. Another design flaw I can see here is just the large mass of this superstructure. This sticks out about 3.5, almost 4 feet to here. So that's quite a bit of stuff that's just in the way that the operator probably can't see, and it's prone to hitting things, and obviously has. Now, I can't confirm that the rest of this machine is going to match the block, simply because that superstructure's on there. And that is really in the way. And not only does it block that, access to brake repairs, the brake system, completely blocked off. Now, I must admit, for what it is, the design of this cab is quite good, and for the time, quite well built. I would be very comfortable in here. No doubt that it was very noisy. You could see under the seat in here where the hydraulics actually go all the way through underneath the seat and operate the blade in the back. This whole thing looks rather cramped, at least for a guy my size. Over here you can see the additional hydraulic lines. My suspicion is these two would go up in the front to the pump, and these two were for the tilt on the blade. I was really appreciating the welding inside of here, and I always do on a lot of these old machines. There are some bad welds too, but this was definitely something that a dealer did that was at least an attempt at high quality. There was one more thing that I just discovered about these tractors that was unique. They were also designed, you could put a loader bucket on them. And that's why the dual hydraulic setup, because this would dump the bucket. The downfall on this was you couldn't really lift them high enough to do much. So you couldn't load trucks with them or anything huge or heavy, but you could carry material. Most of these that do exist, if you do find them, only have the dozer blade. The buckets are very, very difficult to find. These are very desirable setups for folks that used to work at the old McCoy Caterpillar here in Colorado. Another thing I noticed is this cab did keep a lot of water and stuff out of here. The internals inside of here are in relatively good shape. The handles on these levers, although they've got a little bit of UV rot, they're in much better shape than ones that have been out in the open. Like the ones right here on this 6U. Underneath here, you can see the hydraulic hoses, again, going up to the front. And the part of the cab superstructure that comes down here really did make it very incredibly difficult to access any of the brakes or internal components for maintenance. You can always tell a dozer by the excessive wear on the pedals, and this one's not terrible. I've seen worse, but right and left are roughly the same. The left worn a little bit more. Not terrible excessive wear in the main clutch. Also want to show you, I did get the radiator for this machine. It's sitting here on a pallet, and not a lot of usable parts. It's definitely been repaired, brazed right here in this main lower tank. They have adapted some different fittings here. On the bottom and top of the radiator, they have done some makeshift adaptations so they could use rubber hose for the top and the bottom. The side panels aren't terrible. The main top tank might be usable, but the lower tank is definitely not going to be usable. So possibly some good parts off of here too. Much like all of these tractors that we just brought home, there is not one of them with a usable water temp gauge. That is one thing that is really bothering me that I'm trying to find for our 4G project. So, there you have it, folks. The space-age design of the McCoy Caterpillar D4 blade. I do want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. I don't know what it is, but there's something about this dozer blade that makes me want to get it working again on maybe a different machine. I don't know that I would keep the cab, but I don't know how comfortable I would feel with that thing moving up and down around me without the cab on there. Dad, I know you're watching this. Just don't even think about it. We're not doing it. We're good. We're good. But it might happen.